Final Fantasy XIV has this thing with mostly super structured and intuitive rotations on the various combat jobs. There are, of course, exceptions, but most of them have a reasonably logical, optimal path. However, sometimes it seems pretty clear that the leveling experience has been forgotten or ignored a bit. I want to show off 5 examples of these rather cursed rotations that you might experience either as you level up the job or when synced down. And good luck to you if you do. Number 1. Level 40 to 49 Warrior. With the release of Endwalker, Mythril Tempest was upgraded to give Surging Tempest instead of extending it. Before this change, even if Mythril Tempest could have been available at level 40, it would not be able to extend Surging Tempest before Storm's Eye was there to initially grant it. But with Mythril Tempest now being able to grant the buff already at level 40, the question is it worth it to use Mythril Tempest on a single target just for that? Even more awkward when you realize that Overpower also has to be included, which add together for the same potency as Maim, but 2 GCDs. However, the combo, without skill speed, is guaranteed to boost the next 12 GCDs by 10%, which, when you count it out, actually means that, assuming you spend all your beast gauge for Inner Beast, and otherwise just do 1, 2, 3 combos, and maintain Mythril Tempest, you will do about 0.1% more DPS than if you don't use Mythril Tempest. However, this is also ignoring the presence of Berserk, which means Surging Tempest also enables you to boost the potency of your 3 best attacks during Berserk by 10%. Essentially, having a valley that causes your average and your peak to be 10% higher is worth it. This leads to an actually optimal rotation where you use your AoE combo twice per minute and otherwise play your rotation normally. The math chi on this is the following. The potency of your 1, 2, 3 combo, which goes 150, 250, 380, leads to an average of 260. After 5 full combo sequences, you would have accumulated enough gauge for 3 Inner Beasts, which have a potency of 330. Their potency being greater than the average means that it is beneficial to include them. Adding them in leads to an average potency of 271.67 per GCD. If you then have 10 of these average GCDs per 12 GCDs, and then the last 2 GCDs are Overpower and Mythril Tempest, then the average goes down to 247.22 per GCD. However, as it also increases the damage by 10%, this actually results in an average of 271.94 potency per GCD, which indeed is 0.1% greater than just not using Mythril Tempest. Being able to choose to use Berserk on the better options also means that specifically the Berserk part of the rotation gets all the benefits with none of the negatives, meaning this just makes it even better to use Mythril Tempest. Furthermore, a common issue with Warrior in the sub 70 level range is to actually line up that perfect situation where your Berserk actually will be Storm's Path and 2 Inner Beasts, while also letting no beast gauge go to waste, and not delaying Berserk. However, as Mythril Tempest generates 0 beast gauge in this level range, and has some flexibility in when you choose to do it, you at least have the capacity to slow down your single target rotation by 2 or 4 GCDs by using Mythril Tempest sooner or later, which can slide your rotation right in place to get it a bit more consistently optimal, so you don't have to maim Storm's Path Inner Beast. Of course, all this goes away exactly when you hit level 50, but it is a relatively well-known cursed rotation simply because of how cursed it is. Number 2. Level 50 to 59 Monk. You may have already guessed it, but indeed, this is about perfect balance. At level 50 to 59, Monk's filler rotation is very close in power. In fact, with 0 crit stat, the average potency with the base crit chance and power included, as well as the potential resulting steel peak resource in mind, Dragon Kick and Bootshine averages 403.82 potency. Twin Snakes and True Strike averages 409.47 potency, and Demolish and Snap Punches average 416.27 potency. As crit increases, both the True Strike set and Snap Punch set averages will increase ever so slightly faster than the Bootshine set average, meaning that none of the three combos stand out significantly when you really think about it. The core problem with Perfect Balance in all this is that at best, Perfect Balance enables you to choose to do 6 of your best GZDs back to back, at the cost of being forced to do Dragon Kick with no orb generation. No, using Bootshine with the orb but no guaranteed crit is not worth it. Meaning that whatever potency you gain is pushed back by the average potency loss of having to use a vanilla basic Dragon Kick, which, at base value, is about 157 potency worse than the average between Dragon Kick and Bootshines. Again, with everything considered. That means that just to break even, 6 Perfect Balance GZDs would need to lead to a gain of 26 potency per GZD, which on its own is simply not happening. Hypothetically, you could use Perfect Balance during something like Battle Voice or Divination to specifically access your orb spenders for a slight uptick in damage. However, as you will have at most 4 orbs spread across your entire gauge, only 1 full Perfect Balance would be worth using in this way. Meaning that now this loss of 157 potency is spread over 3 GZDs instead. So now the gain has to be greater than 52 potency. Which is actually possible if you have both a melee card and a divination from an Astrologian. Possibly. However, the problem here is that in the effect duration of divination, you would be able to fit 9 GZDs, which would be enough to generate all those orbs and spend them, which means that the only time where this trick could at best be a big maybe is if you spend all your orbs in the first part of divination, then generate new orbs, and then used Perfect Balance to use them. But you could just spend your orbs normally and then not have to have a garbage Dragon Kick afterwards. So, not using Perfect Balance, even in this most convenient setup, is still not worth it. For the math Kai on this, starting with 0 critical hit stat, as the long story short is that more crit doesn't really change anything anyway, aside from the fact that the Bootshine set falls a bit more behind before Forbidden Chakra. Dragon Kick's potency has a 95% chance of being 240, and a 5% chance of being 336, and having an 80% chance of giving a fifth of a Steel Peak, which is worth 36 potency, combined with the possibility that it could also crit. It all adds together for an average of 246.27 potency. Bootshine being guaranteed to crit means that it will always do 380 times 1.4, which is 532 potency. And always have the 80% chance of getting a fifth of a Steel Peak, leading to a combined 561.38 potency. These two combine for an average of 403.82 potency, since you have to alternate them. Twin Snakes and True Strike alternate, with one having 340 potency and the other 460 potency, leading to an average of 400 potency. This is then calculated in the same way as Dragon Kick, with a 5% chance to crit and the Steel Peak bit, leading to a combined average of 409.47 potency, more than the Bootshine set. Finally, Demolish and Snap Punch average out with 2 Snap Punches to 406.67 potency. And, with the same calculation as for Dragon Kick, leads to an average potency of 416.27 potency, making it the best of the 3 sets. The potency that is lost upon finishing Perfect Balance is the difference between Dragon Kick on its own and the average potency of the Bootshine set, since the no-form Dragon Kick does not lead to a Bootshine follow-up in the same way, meaning 403.82 minus 246.27, which equates to 157.55. This is then divided over the number of Perfect Balance GZDs as the potency it needs to ultimately gain. There isn't really much more math to be done here though, as even if you could use Perfect Balance to make a slight spike in damage during a buff, even with everything going right, simply doing the 1-2-3s normally would result in more damage over the course of the fight. So what can Perfect Balance be used for in this level range? Use it as a finisher. If you can chain Perfect Balance back to back and the fight ends before the no-form Dragon Kick afterwards, then you get all the benefit, however little there is, with 0 downside. It makes Perfect Balance a decent way to effectively clean out the coffers by using Perfect Balance to access all the orb spenders as quickly as possible. It is better than nothing, if all the math went over your head, the short version is Perfect Balance is a good combat finisher at level 50 to 59. Don't worry, if your brain overheated with math, the remaining ones are a bit simpler. Number 3. Level 84 to 93 Red Mage. At this level, Jolt 3 is learned and the Fire and the Stone get a potency boost, but ironically, Jolt 3's 360 potency beats the Fire and the Stone's 340. They of course generate a combined 1 more mana than Jolt, however, is 1 mana worth 20 potency? Well, at level 84 to 89, the combined potency of a melee combo is 2400, and takes about 4 GCD's worth of time to cast. Giving the melee combo a slight advantage here, let's say the opportunity potency lost was 4 Jolt 3s, which is a combined 1440 potency. And let's ignore the mana generation of this for now. Then the true potency gained is 960, at the net cost of 81 combined mana. Divide the 960 potency over 81 mana and we get an average of 11.85 potency per mana, so 1 mana is definitely not worth 20 potency. At level 90, where resolution is added, the combo takes 1 more GCD worth of time and gains 750 potency, and generates slightly more mana, meaning the net gained potency is 1350 at the cost of a net loss of 73 combined mana. Same calculation leads to 18.49 potency per mana. This is a very mathy way of saying even though the Fire and the Stone generates more mana and everything tells you it's a proc, you should spend it. In a vacuum, in this level range, before the Fire and the Stone's potencies overtake Jolt 3, they're actually not worth using. In a vacuum? Well, let's say you could see the future. And you know that about 15 seconds before the fight ends, you will have a combined 97 mana. And 3 the Fires or the Stones would lead to 1 additional melee combo that you would have been able to spend here before the end of the fight. In that case, you would gain a huge amount of damage from a measly 60 potency loss beforehand. In other words, in this super janky level range, whether the Fire and the Stone are actually worth casting is a question of knowing the future. The fact that the Red Mage rotation becomes perfectly predictable when the Fire and the Stone is otherwise removed from the equation, you can actually estimate this in advance. If you know how long the fight is going to be, you can then simply sprinkle the necessary amount of the Fires and the Stones out over the course of the fight, massively reducing the potential chance of failure to reach the amount you need. To calculate exactly how many of the Fires or the Stones is worth casting for an extra melee combo is a much more difficult and complicated task. However, when the target is to replace your final 5 or so GCDs with a melee combo, we can assume the alternative is 5 regular GCDs, where at level 90, this averages 370 potency between Jolt and the Thunder and the Arrow. Shockingly, you can break even on the potency gained and lost with 65 the Stones and the Fires, since each one costs you 20 potency and the combined melee combo 3150 potency minus the 5 regular GCDs 1850 adds up to 1300. However, because of that, we can probably agree that the amount of the Stones and the Fires you should cast to gain that extra melee combo should be much less than that to actually be worth the effort in the first place, right? If you're targeting a very specific number, knowing that it is just 10, for example, would also massively increase the probability you actually get all 10, than if you needed, say, 50 of them. And being precise is important because when doing this, it matters that you ultimately finish the fight with as close to 0 combined mana as possible, as any excess equates to unnecessary the Fires and the Stones. Now, it probably makes a lot more sense that a lot of Red Mages just defaulted to either, I will ignore this and just continue to use procs, I don't care, or, I guess it's just all Jolt 3 from here on out. And never in between those two. Number 4, level 46 to 53 Scholar. Art of War is a gain on 1. This one is very simple. At level 46 to 53, Ruin 1 does 150 potency, Art of War does 150 potency per target, and Ruin 2 does 140 potency. Scholar's auto attack is reasonably impactful, especially in this level range. casting a spell with a cast time delays your auto attack timer by the cast time minus about half a second, the slight cast time. Meaning, casting Rune 1 delays your auto attack by 1 second each time you cast it. Art of War being instant means it does not delay your auto attack, meaning every Art of War cast instead of Rune 1, while in melee range, is a gain of about 25/78 of an auto attack. Rune 2 also has this advantage. However, in my calculations, this fraction of an auto attack is less than 10 potency. So Rune 2 would be weaker than Rune 1 in melee range. But this is the origin of Art of War as a gain on 1. At level 54, Broil is learned, which is 220 potency, and Art of War upgrades to 165 potency, while Rune 2 upgrades to 160 potency. This means that at or above level 54, Art of War is no longer a gain on 1. However, if you have to keep moving, Art of War is better for single target than Rune 2 for what it's worth. And finally number 5, level 15 to 71 Summoner. It is actually another case of auto attacks. At level 15, Topaz Rune is learned, and Topaz Rune 1, 2, and 3 all do precisely the same amount of damage as a regular Rune 1, 2, or 3 for a Summoner. However, Topaz Rune is instant, whereas the regular rune has a cast time. Once again, Summoner auto attacks are reasonably impactful for a Mage auto attack, but it matters more at lower levels. The important part is that it isn't until Topaz Rite at level 72 before the Topaz Gemshine actually is objectively stronger than an equivalent regular rune, beyond being an instant cast. However, you can flip it into a gain by auto attacking. However, Summoner has 2 other subcategories of janky rotations as well. 5B, level 45 to 49 Summoner. In this very specific level range, Summon Garuda does only 100 potency, but it is AoE. However, it needs 5 targets to break even with the 2 other summons which are still single target. And Emerald Rune 2 is only slightly stronger than a regular rune in terms of potency per second. So Summon Garuda must hit at least 3 targets to even be worth using at all. Aside from the fact that it is instant, so it can be handy for movement, of course. 5C, level 54 to 71 Summoner. Summoners that have done any Stormblood ultimates are probably perfectly clear on where I'm pointing next. Emerald Rune 3 is exactly as strong as regular Rune 3 in terms of potency per second. However, Emerald Rune does not and never scales with spell speed, but regular Rune 3 does. This means that a moderate amount of spell speed means Rune 3 overtakes Emerald Rune in value, even with Emerald Rune's auto attack advantage. This is particularly obvious if you use optimized Stormblood ultimate gear with a GCD of 2.12, as at that point, Emerald Rune's 120 potency per second is not very impressive put next to regular Rune's 141.51. And no, auto attacks will not help. So unless you actually need the mobility, then there is simply no need to cast Emerald Rune at all in this situation. Now, do you know of any really wacky optimal rotations in the leveling stages of a job? I would love to hear about them in the comments. It doesn't even have to be optimal, but it would be funny if it is somewhat effective. Now, that is all for this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you would like to support me and my channel more directly, you can become a member like these wonderful people here. You can also alternatively support me through Ko-Fi, link in the description. You can also support the channel by letting the YouTube algorithm know by liking the video, leaving a comment, subscribing, sharing, and hitting the bell to get notified when next I post a video. Fun fact, originally in Shadowbringers, Mythril Tempest only extended the buff from Storm's Eye by 10 seconds, and was capped at 30 seconds. Back then, Storm's Eye itself also simply applied 30 seconds of the buff and did not extend it at all. This was changed to the way it works now in 5.3, still in Shadowbringers, but it wasn't until the start of Endwalker before Mythril Tempest could grant the buff all on its own.